Welcome, Dr. James Beckett, Sports Card Insights. Thank you, sponsors, Beckett Media, Beckett Grading, Beckett Authentication, ComC.com, Burbank Sports Cards, Mike Stadium Sports Cards, Heritage Auctions, Huggins and Scott Auctions, Tops, Upper Deck, and Panini. Another episode about shill bidding, a story that won't go away. There's more to be discussed. If I didn't realize it before, I realize now there's obviously a zero tolerance for rush to judgment, one strike and you're out for shill bidders, especially when you're bidding on your own cards. It's the most obvious form of shill bidding. I get that, and I fully agree. Whether it's what I've called defensive or offensive shill bidding, it's illegal and not okay. But the reason I'm bringing it up is it's commonly happening through proxies. And that's both on the defensive side for when things go for very low, as opposed to the offensive side when things are going above what you would think. I think those situations are different. I wanted to make a distinction. Now, that's not what Patrick did. And what he did was definitely not okay. I hope I didn't give the impression I thought it was okay. But I had the sense that the punishment should fit the crime. I thought Patrick's treatment was harsh. I wasn't whitewashing. My opinion was that he should not be excommunicated, as some were suggesting. I believe there was and is more to the story, and I'm the one that said I wanted a broader discussion. First of all, Patrick Ryan, P. Ryan, and I are friends, but we're not best buds. We don't know each other that well. We're very different in our personalities and very different in how we hobby. However, one of my longtime, really good friends, roughly my age, highly respected, very successful, vouched so strongly for Patrick many years ago. I took that into account. And usually, and in fact, almost always, my friends my age I see around town, they know I'm a lifer for sports card collecting. And they frequently will tell me, I've got a friend I know that collects and he'd love to meet you. But this friend that turned out to be Patrick's mentor since college, I gave this very strong vouch for Patrick and said, Jim, I've got a collector friend that you need to meet. He may want to meet you, but you need to meet him. He's been very successful and he's really into it. So I met with Patrick. And again, he's different from me, very intense. He's even bombastic. Now, it was mentioned on Hobby Hotline afterwards, I think Victor said it, that Patrick is the same as Bill Mastro. I can tell you that is not true. They're not the same. I know them both. What Bill Mastro did was admitted, and he paid a high price, prison. But he had a pattern of business practices in his own auction company that were illegally rigged. If Patrick had been doing that, I would come down hard on him as well. I did not see that. If it's there, then he ought to be punished, and there ought to be a chance to give an account of what's going on. If it's an honest mistake, if it's a pattern, that I'm wrong, because I'm sticking up for a guy that my buddy said was a quality, high-integrity guy. No one's denying that Patrick is smart. I don't think anybody's denying that I'm smart. Smart criminals don't bid on their own stuff. I'm not a criminal. Patrick's not a criminal, to my knowledge. So if you bid on your own stuff, it's traceable. If you're a criminal, you use a proxy. That's what a shill is. A shill is this proxy that you dupe or you pull into your web. And it's not your wife or somebody in your family that has the same last name. That's a stupid criminal. It's not a smart criminal. Now, if you're a law-abiding good guy, you don't intend to bid on your own stuff. If you do, you're not a good guy. But if you mistakenly bid on your own stuff, and in fact, it happens because auction software typically prevents self-bidding. They wouldn't need to prevent it if it didn't occasionally happen, because you literally are not able to bid on your own stuff because it bounces back and says you can't bid on your own item. Now, there's such an easy workaround with getting somebody else to do it. That's all I'm referring to. That's unfortunate. It ought to be stamped out, but it's really difficult with 3 degrees of separation or whatever people will do. Now, Patrick alluded to this in some way with his situation with Acquire, the third-party consignor. They did not list him as the consignor, so he did not get the alert that said, hey, you're bidding on your own item. I accept that. Acquire has the ability to run their business, and for what they think are legitimate business reasons, they do not want to list their clients there. I get that too. Acquire is part of the complication in this. Acquire started by somebody that used to be at PWCC, frequently accused of encouraging shill bidding, and they left eBay and were later acquired by Fanatics. Probstein was accused of those things, and Now he's left eBay, and I don't think there was any coercion or anything. He's forming Snipe, his own platform, and I hope he's successful. But a while back, I had a non-hobby literate friend consigning some stuff for his niece and nephew. I thought, Rick, I know you've been accused of these things, but what is your policy? And he said, you can't bid if you're the consigner or the owner of the cards. That's just so obvious. In fact, he was somewhat short with me. Why are you even asking? And I wasn't asking if there's a gray area, but he did say, if somebody else bids on it, I have no way of knowing if they are in any way related. And I still just do the best you can with this. Okay. I didn't have a problem with that. Didn't bid. In fact, to be clear, I've never bid on my own items. I've never had anyone I know bid on my items. I've never bid anybody else's cards up. If I bid on something, which is not a frequent occurrence, I'm bidding to win at that price. I'm not unethical and I'm not stupid. I just don't hobby that way. When I was doing price guides, I was certainly aware of auctions, but it was more as an observer than a bidder or a participant. In fact, I had a couple of decades where I didn't buy when something was extra low price. I couldn't buy it, even though I thought this is a steal, because I was doing price guides. I had a very strong conflict of interest for myself and for our company. Now, with Patrick, our conversation never got over toward reneging, bidding something up and then not paying. I really hate that. I abhor that. The reason I brought up defensive bidding is that almost never happens if you're in a defensive situation. I talked about an item I had put up that I could not bid on, did not tell anybody, that was going for 20% of its established value due to a listing error. It was underdescribed, and the marketing, it was just messed up. And I am stuck, and it felt like a gut punch. I took my lumps, and I thought, this is tough. But whoever bought it absolutely paid for it because it was a great deal. And it didn't get it at 50% off. That's barely even defensive. 20%, you're thinking, I don't want my card to go for 20%, but you still can never bid on your own item. That's so obvious. Now, you can contact the auction company. They claim you don't know it's going for low now, but there's probably going to be a rush of bidding activity right at the deadline. That is not always true. And when there's not very many watchers and they've incorrectly described it, even if they've changed the description, it became a bad deal for me. So I took my lumps on it. That's just the way it is. Furthermore, there was no premeditation. I'm not thinking, what if this? I was shocked. I had an item going for so low. Shill bidding that I'm worried about is premeditated. It is planned. In fact, I think there's a playbook for the shill bidders. And frankly, the other unfortunate part is I believe it's usually a team sport. It's not one person shilling, it's a group. Okay, so talking about friends and groups and employees or anybody you've got a relationship, is that suspect? Can you tell your friends, hey, I'm putting some items up, whether they're going for low or high or whatever, you're going to just tell them, check out my items. That happens a lot. And if they're your friends, say, I want to check out my friends' cards and see. And same thing for the employer-employee. Whether it looks like a steal or whatever, does that make them shills? If your employee bids on your item, or if your friend or your cousin bids on your item, is that a shill? And it actually can be a shill, but it isn't necessarily a shill. Yes, it's shill bidding if you have an understanding with your friend or your employee that you want your card back from them for some exchange, and that is absolutely happening, and that is proxy shill bidding, absolutely wrong, but difficult to detect if you get more than 1 degree of separation, which is kind of conspiracy. Again, don't do it. But it's not shill bidding if you tell your friend, somebody's getting a good deal, I'd rather it be you. But further, you can't leave it there. And perhaps it's a player that they PC. You've got to say, I do not want my card back. I am selling it to the highest bidder. If that bidder is you, don't give it back to me. Don't sell it back to me. Don't trade it back to me. You owe me nothing. You don't have to do the same thing for me. I'm in a tough position with an auction, and I just want to let my friends know, you buy it, you have it, you own it, done deal. Okay? To me, that is not shill bidding. Similarly, on the high end, when you're already at the current comps or above, or wherever you are, I'm talking about 20% is defensive. 80% is not defensive because you've got the transaction costs. Can you encourage your family or your friends, your associates, your employees to bid on your items? Is that going to make them shill or not shill if the item goes for comps or perhaps above? Now, probably it doesn't. but it could. And it's based on motive, which is really hard to judge for other people. But more tellingly, you can discover some things based on their actions, their pattern of actions. Very hard to prove. For example, if you're bidding up an item for your boss, regardless of his or her foreknowledge, that is manipulative shill bidding. And that is illegal. That's wrong. If you win the card at an exorbitant price to impress your boss or your brother-in-law or whatever, that is shill bidding. Is it becoming clear that I'm against shill bidding? But my frustration is to reduce a discussion of shill bidding to the simplicity of just bidding on your own items is naive and unhelpful in solving the real problem. And I think the real problem is the fact that as technology has improved and as the hobby has become no longer predominantly solitary, friends work together to help each other. They may not even met each other, but they're in groups where they work together to help each other with their hobby, and they understand each other's hobby goals. Nothing wrong with that. But if those are investment-related goals and they collude to drive prices up to mutual benefit, and I'm telling you, that is happening. You know it's happening. That's what I'm talking about. That's the shill bidding on each other's stuff and bidding up cards in order to increase comps for their mutual benefit or for their holdings. That is a scheme, that is a conspiracy, and that should be punished. And I believe that type of activity is detectable with deep scrutiny of bid patterns. And the auction houses could do more, but they don't. I don't think they believe it's in their short-term best interest to do so. It's revenue negative. It's not easy to detect, but it's not much of a deterrent either. But you're dealing with patterns, and this implicit criminal syndicates bidding activity can result in winning an item and then maybe not even paying, reneging, or somehow being the second high bidder, and you've maliciously bid up the winner who then has overpaid unfairly. Instead of focusing on defense, the non-defensive situations are my greatest concern, and I believe they are a normal occurrence. I'm wondering, is there some nefarious skill I am not aware of how to be the second high bidder? I believe big data analysis by the people that have the auction data could detect candidates for greater scrutiny if you always come in second, or if you several times win and don't pay, zero feedback, all those kind of things. I believe the auction houses could do better, because the obvious thing is if you bid on your own items, proxy shill bidding where there's 2 or 3 degrees of separation, no apparent connection. Obviously, if you're bidding on your boss's cards or your best friends, that's 1 degree of separation. They might catch that, but they ought to try to catch it. The reason I'm talking about this is because it's not that different from what it was 40 years ago. We had to investigate the high and low sales. I've said we use trim means at times. We're looking at vetting the lowest, the highest, trying to seek a plausible explanation for something that seems out of line. Is it an outlier? It's hard to be, in fact, it's impossible to be the thought police. But after you see a pattern, you might come to not trust or do trust certain sources. There has to be context for comps. Dick's Sporting Goods, Paul Skeen's card, the 1 of 1, that's not a true comp. And that's a famous example. It's not shill bid, to my knowledge. But again, I pity the poor underbidder. But I don't know. Maybe the underbidder was disappointed. Okay, so auction houses are allowed to bid up an item on behalf of the consignor. I hate that. I think that's bad. Now, even if it's disclosed, which it's supposed to be or must be disclosed, but in some cases it seems it's in the fine print. So I don't like it. I'm a purist. I want to see an auction be fair to everybody, and I want an accurate description, properly marketed, a fair deal for everybody. Many years ago, there was an auction house, another experience I'm aware of. Didn't happen to me, but I was close enough to the situation to know this auction house poorly described, I believe intentionally, some of the auction items that were then quietly scooped up at bargain prices by auction house cronies. Not just to have circumstantial evidence, but I know the person that got burned. That's very frustrating, but I can't prove it, and I'm not going to do any innuendo, not going to out anybody, because that's defamatory. But that's another conspiracy related to shill bidding. It's not exactly shill bidding, but it's bad conduct by the auction house that caused auction items to go below what they should have gone. And we've got to have punishment, but it's hard to prove. And that's why you're not going to see a lot of civil lawsuits. If it's criminal, again, it has to be a criminal threshold to get the DA involved or whatever. But if there's a civil lawsuit, who's the plaintiff? Who's the aggrieved person? Is it just the underbidder, or is it a whole class of underbidders? Is it the whole hobby? But that's a class action. Just crazy, but might even be warranted. Who's the defendant? Is it just the shill bidder or the mastermind or the auction house or a third-party intermediary that didn't do due diligence or were negligent in some way? These are tough questions. And what are the potential damages? Is it the delta between what was paid and what should have been paid? It's way more than that. But what's at stake is the integrity of our hobby. And if that is undermined by some bad actors frequently acting together, that must be taken super seriously and stopped. So, thanks for listening.